少年よ神話になれ青い風が今胸のドアを叩いても私だけをただ見つめて微笑んでるあなたそっと触れるもの求めることに夢中で運命さえまだ知らない痛いけな瞳だけどいつか気づくでしょうその背中には遥か未来目指すための羽があること残酷な天使の手で窓辺からやがて飛び立つほとばしる熱きパックスで思い出を裏切るならこの空を抱いて輝く少年よ神話になれ
Welcome, everybody, to the second episode of our Drop Culture Podcast Special Edition, Neon Genesis Evangelion. If you are watching along with us, it's on Netflix right now. If you have your own copies, whatever collection that you have, anything like that, definitely feel free to kind of keep up with us. And if you watch them over and over again like I do in preparation for the show, I usually watch them at least 7, 8, maybe more times because they are about 21, 22 minutes. So I really kind of dig into them just to look at everything. A lot of interesting things have been kind of brought up in my attention or brought to my attention, and that was looking at the cinematography of these. And I kind of want to touch on that a little bit right at the very beginning because looking at it from that perspective now, they really do have very, very good camera angles, good pacing with the camera. For the short amount of time that they have some really interesting things like showing the camera through and behind people, you know, so you're not necessarily like an observer that's on the same level. You're that fly on the wall kind of a thing, which with most television shows or anything else like that. But they have interesting angles of the fight scenes. They do a lot of pull-out shots to where you see a lot of the main action. But the internal scenes of the character development, you see them from different angles. Like the bigger people, you see them from almost a Greg Toland kind of a looking up perspective.
Sure.
So like Gendo Akari, you're always looking up at him whenever you're seeing him because you're seeing him from almost Shinji's view.
Right.
And when I mention Greg Toland, of course, I'm representing he's representing, you know, the angle that Citizen Kane basically had,
Right.
looking at the two giants from down below. And you're never really technically on their level, but you are, you know, because you get to see them from nowhere. And most of the time you see it from Shinji's view, which he's a pretty short guy, and they're always kind of looking up.
Absolutely.
And I'm going to be interested to see, now that I look at that kind of an angle, to see if I'm going to see more of that and how it'll even out and go above by the time they get to the end episodes.
Okay.
You know?
Okay.
So I think they'll kind of get up there because even with the Avas, you're at a ground level almost, kind of
Right.
looking up. So you are seeing these things as giants. You're seeing the whole world as a giant. Shinji, a lot of the times you're looking at from above, you know, from a top level or an eye level. You're never really seeing anything because he's not as big as the other characters are technically in that world. He's not a leader yet, but he's basically part of something bigger than he really ever thought.
That's fair. I really was going to say, pardon me. I was going to say that some of the use of colors in some of the shots are pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And like contrasting, which I like. There's a specific scene in this episode we're about to do where it's almost completely all blue. And it's definitely contrasting from what the rest of the story, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it sets a mood, which I thought was cool.
It's kind of like a more melancholy type of a deal, or not type of a deal, but more a melancholy type of a mood that they're portraying with that.
Yeah, just and I think when you can use those things, you know, like you were talking about the cinematography, the colors, things like that, that's how you can individualize from, just the mainstream run-of-the-mill.
And it's an interesting perspective because somebody on YouTube, and I will kind of shout them out on some of the synopsis and everything like that for it, but basically said, hey, we need to look at this because of the Lynchian style.
Okay.
They probably pull a lot of influences from everybody in this to kind of give it a more adult feel, even though there are a lot of anime moments in it. There's
usually, so far, and again, I'm only 2 episodes in, but it seems like there's 1 to 2 per episode.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, well, that's like the over-the-top.
Correct, yeah.
Anime.
They show the big eyes or, the squinty eyes or something like that for it, and the tear down the cheek or something. But they really do, they add those in there to kind of still ground you in this is not real type of a situation, which I thought that was a very interesting perspective to look at because I had never looked at it that way before. I mainly looked at the storyline instead of the way it was done because I never have looked at anime that way. Most of the anime that I guess that I've watched has a lot of, it's just more actiony,
Right.
So backgrounds blurred, things like that. This one, you can look at the overall atmosphere because it is kind of grounded in a little bit of, the real feel of life, so you get to see Tokyo 3, you get to see a lot of the interaction with the city because the city is a character in this as well.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a main character because he is, Shinji is defending it in a way. Or not in a way, but he really is.
Right.
Everybody in Nerve is basically defending the city, which is defending the whole world. So
Right.
being, I think a main character in this is actually really cool that they're actually using it like that. They're defending the city, but yet they're defending their headquarters at the same time. And of course, we won't really give too much away on everything that's going on, but that way we can build up to more of the story as it goes.
Right.
So we just don't introduce
I'm
everything.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So there's a lot going on. So just as a wrap up for the first episode, Shinji basically comes to Tokyo 3 at his father's behest.
Yes.
He gets summoned there after living with his sensei somewhere else, and we get to see the first interaction of the angel come through, which the angel comes out of the water and then actually starts from a long ways away, I guess, to maybe test the defenses of, the headquarters and everything like that to see what people are made of. And the angel learns as it's going, and you kind of get to see that first interaction with all the main people like Misato and the main people that are part of the military, the JSSDF. You get to see a little bit of Nerve, so they're introducing these things as they go, which is really good in that first episode. So it gives you a good scope.
A little bit of Ray.
Yeah. Just a small spot of Ray.
Spot of Ray,
and you still really don't know who Ray is, but she's one of the children that are part of this grand scheme of things. So once we get to episode 2. Because episode 1 ends on the note to where it's like, hope he survives. Boom, done.
Right.
So this episode opens up where Shinji is waking up in the hospital. So let's just give it the title of the show. It's episode 2, Unfamiliar Ceiling / The Beast. It was originally aired on 10/11 of 1995. Shinji wakes up in the hospital and he has no memory of what's going on, from the night before.
Right.
Because basically that's where we're at. He wakes up and he's just staring at the ceiling. And that's a familiar thing for a lot of people too, because once you wake up at a different spot, you don't really know where you're at because first thing you see is the ceiling almost,
right.
And he's laying in a hospital bed. And they really kind of introduce that hospital, and you don't see a lot of people around either. So you're still just not seeing a lot of what's going on. Then they kind of backtrack a little bit, and they get to where Shinji first tries to move the actual Ava,
right?
And maybe I'm jumping ahead a little bit because you kind of get to that interaction to where. And I am jumping ahead because the first kind of interaction with all the characters after he wakes up is Misato, and they're at the point they're at this weird kind of crater in the middle of nowhere, and they're kind of looking at all the stuff, and she's watching the news program, and they're using basically a media cover-up, which she already knows that they were going to use,
Right.
She says that, oh yeah, they're using that cover-up. Well, kind of knows, I know that this was going to happen. So they're all sitting there kind of in the heat, and then they start to drive a little bit more. They're in that big deal, and that's when Misato's talking about air conditioning.
Right.
It's like the greatest invention of man is air conditioning, which is cool. And that kind of shows a little bit more of her almost immaturity, where
Right.
she's still kind of a kid.
I'm not
in a way.
saying she's wrong, but go ahead.
No, not at all. Then she finds out that Shinji wakes up, so she goes to pretty much pick him up at the hospital. When she's at the hospital, you can kind of, in the background, you can hear them talking about, there's a meeting that's about to happen, with all the people in surgery and throughout the hospital about basically, they call it, it's like an interaction B. So it's like the second time that something like this has happened.
Right.
So they're kind of meeting on that. So you if you listen to the episodes or even watch it with the commentary on, not necessarily the commentary, but the subtitles, you get to pick up what they're saying in the background.
Okay.
So you actually get to read a little bit about it. So, and I mean, it doesn't follow the dialogue 100% because it's all text, and but you get to see that little bit in the background that starts talking about that,
Okay.
So that's when she basically takes Shinji back to Nerve headquarters, or one of their headquarters, and they're going on the elevator, and that's when douchebag is there.
Yeah. Yes.
Gendo shows up in the elevator, and he's just looking down at Shinji, and Shinji just looks away. So you can tell that they're still fractured big time. He's just still mad at his father for making him do that.
Well, Gendo's a dick, dude. He doesn't even say a word to him.
No, he just looks at him and stares at him coldly, Misato doesn't say anything either because she feels the same way about him almost,
She says as much.
Yeah. She's just really uncomfortable around him. Then whenever, the door shuts and everything, and then they end up in his office, and they're talking before that, well, they're going to live alone. And he's going to live in this block that's really close to here by himself. And Shinji's okay with that. He's like, all right, that's fine.
That's what we do.
Yeah, that's how we do it. And then I think it's Dr. Fuyutsuki is kind of has the dialogue in the back talking about how that's how the Akaris go.
Yeah.
They live alone, and they're just fine with that. Well, Misato's not. Because she's more based around family. She's just like, hey, you know what? He can't live alone. He's a young kid, and he should live with me. That's when she has that little kind of anime interaction a little bit. And she's like, don't worry, I'm not going to mess around with him. She's like, what? And she's like,
why would you even say that?
Yeah, you can't take a joke. It's kind of funny, because I guess she's portrayed as a little promiscuous almost. She's kind of that free spirit type of a deal.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time figuring out like her role completely in this, and I think maybe that gets cleared up. I'm sure.
Oh yeah,
as I go forward, but it's almost like she's high ranking in what's going on, but at the same time she's like, I don't know, just a girl. You know what I mean? Like,
she's still young,
Yeah,
She might, I don't know her exact age, but, she's probably in her late 20s, early 30s, if that old.
Right.
The way that she's kind of portrayed. But she is smart, and she's head of their tactical division, pretty much.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I knew she was, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But, like, then she acts like she's 16.
Yeah.
Like all the other time, minus buying the beer.
Yeah, exactly, right? So that's whenever they're kind of getting together, and she's like, it's time to party. And in this dub, they kind of add the Sinbad party to it. And I'm like, oh my God, for real, And she's like, it's time to party. And I'm like, wow. They just pulled a Sinbad reference out, right? So I was kind of giggling about that earlier. So she stops. She says, "Hey, let's go get some food." So they're at the deal, and that's when you can hear a little bit more of the regular townspeople or the city folk talking about how the place is not safe anymore. They thought it was supposed to protect them, but how can it protect them from this? And my husband wants me to leave,
Right.
while they're just kind of checking out. And she's got this bag full of just like junk food. It looks like, it's like ramen noodles
It's
and
all
fucking
crap.
Yeah, just like shit.
And Shinji's just looking at it like, what is this?
Yeah, he's got the whole bag in his deal, and it's full of like beer and all kinds of other stuff, right? So they actually end up back at her apartment. She's like, "Hey, look, your stuff's already arrived. Cool." And he kind of stands at the door, And this is where I see that parallel of him in the Eva and also the parallel of him taking that first step.